Oh, when I woke up this morning, I actually did thought that, hey, I think Tennessee is going to win this game. But now I'm looking at, these key factors with Brady Cook and this passing attack and what it's been able to do. And not to mention they're going to be at home as well. I'm actually going to disagree with the model. The model believes that Tennessee is going to win and cover. And not only do I not believe that Tennessee is going to cover, so 1.5, I think Missouri is going to win this game. I think Missouri is going to come out and prove some doubters wrong, and maybe ends the hope of Tennessee going to Atlanta, finally shutting that door. I think Missouri ends up winning this game. I think it's going to be a close one, though. A game that is certainly going to be intriguing for sure. But let's say that I'm wrong, though. And let's say that Tennessee ends up winning that game against Missouri. All of a sudden, there's going to be a lot more eyes on this 7 o'clock game on ESPN. Number 9 Ole Miss going on the road to Athens, Georgia. Now, Sanford Stadium in Athens, Georgia has not seen a lot of high marquee home games in the past few years. But all of a sudden, you get an Ole Miss team, top 10 in the country, rolling into town with a chance to possibly clinch the SEC East tomorrow night. Now, let's say Tennessee does end up winning. Georgia still needs to come out and handle their business. They still have a chance to handle and win the SEC East. But they got to take on a really good Ole Miss squad. Now, Ole Miss, they're going to need a little bit of help to get to Atlanta. They need Alabama to somehow lose its next couple of SEC games. Alabama has Kentucky, and then they have Auburn. Not looking good on that particular front. So, that being said, Ole Miss will need a little bit of help to get to Atlanta. But the very least that they can do is maybe they can play a little bit of spoiler on Georgia's end, maybe force Georgia into an SEC East championship type of scenario, whereas Ole Miss, let's say Ole Miss gets past this Georgia team. The rest of the schedule, their other 2 games, very winnable. They'll have UL Monroe, and UL Monroe, one of the worst teams in the Sun Belt, so we're going to go ahead and mark that as a dub. And then they'll have Mississippi State on the road for the Egg Bowl, and Mississippi State has struggled immensely in SEC play. They're only 1-5 in the SEC, so for all intents and purposes, we'll mark that as a win as well. So Ole Miss is staring at a 10-win season regardless. A win to Georgia, though, is going to make it a really interesting conversation for the College Football Playoff Committee in terms of what happens to Ole Miss in the eyes of the committee. What if Ole Miss wins out? You'll likely get an 11-1 team, but a team that is not going to go to Atlanta and compete for a conference championship because they won't be even able to win their division. So Ole Miss would suddenly be a little bit more taken seriously in that conversation because of that. So a lot on the line here between these 2 games in particular. So how does it happen? Now, it's a double-digit favorite. So how does this game go down? What are the big keys of this game? Because Georgia has historically had Ole Miss's number. Georgia's won 10 of its last 11 games in that series. However, Ole Miss did end up winning the last meeting that they had between these 2 squads. Ole Miss beat Georgia 45-14 in Oxford. That was all the way back in 2016. These 2 teams, even though they're in the same conference, they actually haven't played each other in a while. So, laying down the foundation on what could go down. What are the real big keys of this game? So Ole Miss, we know that they're extremely explosive on offense, especially on the ground. It's about stopping the run, slowing anything that you can do to stop and slow down the run. That's gotta be how you come out and slow down that Ole Miss attack. And that's what Alabama did. That's how Alabama was able to eventually win 24-10. They were able to neutralize that running game. Now, Georgia, even with all the talent that they've lost over the last couple of years, they're still pretty solid at stopping that run game. They are tied for second in the SEC in run defense, only allowing 100 yards per game. Their worst game in the year was actually a surprisingly porous in that 30-21 win against Missouri, when Cody Strader, one of the running backs for the Missouri Tigers, ends up going for 112 for 22 carries, and ended up finding the end zone too. Brady Cook also found over 40 yards on the ground. So maybe Ole Miss could look at what Missouri did in the running game in order to maybe find ways to create big plays on the ground. The big difference between what Missouri did last week and how Ole Miss is going to be able to pull this off is that Ole Miss does have to be effective in the red zone. Missouri was able to get into the red zone on multiple occasions in their matchup against Georgia last weekend. The problem is, Missouri, when they got into the red zone, most of the time they were settling for field goals, whereas Georgia, when they got into the red zone most of the time, they ended up getting touchdowns. They were getting 6 points from the offense instead of just 3 points from their offense. And that was really the difference in the game. It's just the red zone efficiency between those two teams. Georgia is not going to be the type of team that is going to go out and beat itself. You have to go out and beat this Georgia team. That's why Georgia currently has the longest win streak in the NCAA right now. That's why they also haven't lost since 2020, and that was that COVID year. They will not let you beat, they will not beat themselves. You got to go out and beat Georgia. So for Ole Miss to do that, and in order to accomplish that, they got to be effective in terms of that red zone efficiency. And Ole Miss does have the pieces necessary to get that ability to create rushing yards on the ground. Jackson Dart is a very good dual threat quarterback. We know what he can do with his arm. He's got a very good arm, 16 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. His QBR is good for top 15 in the NCAA at the FBS level. So Jackson Dart is a very good quarterback passing the ball. But what Jackson Dart has also been able to accomplish as well, he knows how to, he just knows how, he has a nose for the end zone. He has 330 rushing yards, 7 touchdowns on the ground. He's also paired with Quinshon Judkins, who is 5th in the SEC with 88 rushing yards a game. That's an SEC play. So hypothetically, Ole Miss does have the pieces in order to get an advantage over that Georgia rushing game. The question is, can they execute at a high enough level to actually pull it off? Now, Georgia is not going to be 100% on the defensive side of the ball. They are going to be missing one of their key linebackers and junior linebacker, Jamin Duzman-Johnson. He ended up fracturing his left forearm in that game against Missouri. This is a guy that not only is a key starter for this Georgia defense, this is an All-American that we're talking about. He was, wearing a cast and a sling. So there is a real chance that they do not have him. Now, Coach Kirby Smart has mentioned that they're going to look for innovative plays to allow him to keep playing. But is that locked in? I mean, it shouldn't be locked in for an injury like that. So in the event that All-American linebacker is not going to be able to play, you got some young talent behind him. Sophomores, Jalen Locker, Xavier Story Jr. freshman CJ Allen. It could be a linebacker by committee where you see a rotation of inside linebackers because, not neither of those guys, none of the guys that I mentioned could do everything that Johnson could do, but each person could do pieces of what he was able to bring. And it's going to create a situation where that coaching staff is going to find when to play these guys at the right time. And while they're going to be very good players, maybe potential NFL talents in a way that they're, high 4 stars and 5 stars, like many of the players that Georgia ends up bringing in, they're still inexperienced. They haven't seen a lot of high level football that the talent in front of them has seen. So it's just interesting to watch to see if Johnson will be a good to go or if he would have to be sidelined because of that injury. And lastly, we have to see, can the 12th man come into effect? Now, this game is in Athens, Georgia, and that really helps Georgia's favor because they do have one of the biggest winning streaks at home as well. They are currently sitting on a 24-game winning streak at home, and that's dating back to the Kentucky game. So it's actually at 26 games, if I'm reading that correctly. So Georgia has a 26-game winning streak at home, and they also have a 12-game winning streak against teams specifically that come into Sanford Stadium and come into that game ranked in the top 25. So can the 12th man show up and maybe rattle this Ole Miss offense, maybe create an offsides or a false start? If the 12th man can help contribute in creating a first down or two, that could really help shift the momentum of the game, because Sanford Stadium gives its reputation of kind of being a little bit sleepy, but they haven't had the caliber of opponents at the same time that Georgia has been able to bring in this season through SEC action. We saw what could happen with Kentucky, and now we have Ole Miss. First time in a while that they're bringing in a top 10 team into their stadium. So you absolutely love to see that. So we'll check what the line thinks. We'll see what the line covers. Georgia right now is a 10.5-point favorite according to Vegas. And the model, the Any Given Saturday power rating model, is about dead on. It gives Georgia a little bit more credit. It's at 11.5. Ole Miss is a little bit more healthy than they were in that Alabama game. I will say that first and foremost. Georgia is still going to be without Brock Bowers. On top of that, too, we haven't even talked about the Georgia offense. Here's the thing. I think this is going to be one of those games where I think it's going to be a one-possession game. I think this game is truly going to be close. However, here's what I think is going to happen, though. I don't think Georgia is going to cover this 10.5-point spread. I truly don't believe that. I think Ole Miss is too talented offensively to kind of be blown out of the water. However, I do think the 12th man really does help in this regard. So we're going to take Georgia to win. We're going to take Georgia to win outright. We're not going to take Georgia to cover that 10.5-point spread. We're going to give Ole Miss the benefit of the doubt here. We're going to disagree with the model here yet again. We'll give Ole Miss the 10.5, but we don't see them winning this game now. I just don't see that happening. I think Georgia wins, and because of this win, they will be able to lock in their tickets to go to the SEC championship down in Atlanta.